The Antarctic wind howls across endless white, carrying secrets older than memory itself. Beneath miles of ice that have never known the warmth of human touch, something waits in the darkness. Something that challenges every assumption we've made about our place in history, about when civilization truly began, and about whether we are alone in the story of intelligence on this planet. Welcome, seekers of the unknown, to History for Sleep. I'm your guide through the shadows of the past, where the most extraordinary mysteries lie buried beneath ice and silence. Tonight, we venture to the bottom of the world, to a continent that holds more secrets than any other place on Earth. Close your eyes, let the rhythm of discovery carry you, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about human history. What if I told you that Antarctica, that frozen wasteland we've dismissed as lifeless and empty, might be hiding evidence of a civilization so ancient it predates everything in our history books? What if beneath those miles of ice lie structures, technologies, and knowledge that could rewrite the entire story of life on Earth? What if we are not the first intelligent beings to call this planet home? The evidence is there, scattered across decades of exploration, buried in classified reports, and whispered about in the darkest corners of scientific circles. Satellite images that defy explanation. Geological formations that shouldn't exist. Ancient maps that show coastlines hidden for millions of years. And discoveries so shocking that governments have classified them, locked them away from public view, as if the truth itself were too dangerous to reveal. But tonight, in the safety of sleep and shadow, we'll uncover what they don't want us to know. We'll follow the breadcrumbs of evidence that point to something extraordinary lurking beneath Antarctica's ice. Something that suggests human history is far stranger, far older, and far more complex than we've ever imagined. The story begins with maps. Ancient maps that shouldn't exist, drawn with impossible precision centuries before satellites could peer down from space. In 1929, a scholar named Gustav Dane was working in the archives of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul when he made a discovery that would haunt historians for decades. Hidden among Ottoman treasures was a map drawn by Admiral Piri Reis in 1513, showing the coastlines of South America and Africa with startling accuracy. But it was what lay at the bottom of the map that made scholars freeze in disbelief. There, rendered in precise detail, was the northern coast of Antarctica. Not the ice-covered wasteland we know today, but the actual rocky coastline that lies hidden beneath miles of ice. The coastline that modern science didn't map until 1949, using sophisticated sonar equipment and decades of exploration. How could a 16th century Turkish admiral have known the true shape of Antarctica's coast? The official explanation is that he copied from earlier maps, perhaps Roman or Greek sources now lost to time. But this explanation only deepens the mystery. If Piri Reis was copying from ancient sources, then who originally mapped Antarctica, and when? Because according to every geological model we have, Antarctica has been covered in ice for at least 15 million years. The Piri Reis map is not alone. The Orontius Phineus map of 1531 shows Antarctica as two large landmasses connected by smaller ones, remarkably similar to what modern ice-penetrating radar has revealed beneath the ice sheet. The Mercator map of 1569 depicts Antarctic rivers and mountain ranges with an accuracy that should have been impossible without aerial reconnaissance. These maps suggest something that mainstream archaeology refuses to consider: that Antarctica was once ice-free, warm enough to support life, and inhabited by beings capable of sophisticated cartography. But the geological timeline says this is impossible. Antarctica moved to its current polar position around 30 million years ago and has been frozen ever since. Unless the geological timeline is wrong. Unless Antarctica experienced periods of warmth much more recently, than we've been told, unless something or someone was mapping its coastlines when they were still visible above the ice. The evidence for recent ice-free periods in Antarctica is more compelling than most people realize. In 1949, Admiral Richard Byrd led Operation High Jump, the largest Antarctic expedition in history. With over 4,000 men, 13 ships, and 23 aircraft, it was officially a scientific mission to map the continent and test equipment in polar conditions. But the scale and military nature of the operation suggested something more urgent was at stake. Byrd's team made discoveries that were immediately classified. They found areas of Antarctica where the ground was warm, where snow melted even in the depths of winter. They discovered lakes of liquid water beneath the ice, maintained at temperatures that should have been impossible. And in the most remote valleys, they found something else. Something that would remain classified for decades. The official reports speak of geological anomalies, of mineral deposits that didn't match the surrounding rock formations. But the whispered accounts from expedition members tell a different story. They speak of structures buried in the ice, of metal objects that showed signs of artificial construction, of geometric patterns carved into stone that suggested intelligence and purpose. One member of Byrd's expedition, a geologist whose name remains classified to this day, kept an unofficial journal that surfaced decades later. In it, he describes entering a valley where the ice had recently melted, revealing structures unlike anything in known human architecture. The stones were fitted together with precision that rivaled the finest masonry, yet they showed no tool marks, no signs of the chisels and hammers that human builders would have used. More disturbing were the symbols carved into these stones. They were not hieroglyphs or any known writing system. They were geometric patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles, spirals and angles that created an almost hypnotic effect when viewed for too long. The geologist wrote that staring at these symbols made him feel dizzy, as if they were designed to affect human consciousness in ways he couldn't understand. The journal entry that got him permanently reassigned to desk duty described what he found in the deepest part of the valley. A chamber carved into solid rock, its walls covered in those strange symbols. And in the center of the chamber, a series of stone tablets covered in the same geometric script. The tablets were warm to the touch, despite the freezing temperatures outside. And when he placed his hand on one, he swore he could feel a faint vibration, as if some kind of energy still flowed through the ancient stone. The tablets were immediately confiscated and shipped to an undisclosed location. The geologist was sworn to secrecy and transferred to a research station in Alaska, where he spent the rest of his career studying ice formation patterns. His journal was discovered after his death, hidden in a safety deposit box along with photographs that show structures no human civilization could have built. But Byrd's expedition was not the last to make such discoveries. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, as the Cold War intensified, both American and Soviet teams conducted secret operations in Antarctica. Officially, these were scientific missions, part of the International Geophysical Year. Unofficially, they were treasure hunts, races to uncover whatever secrets the ice continent held. The Soviets were the first to report finding what they called thermal anomalies deep beneath the ice. Areas where the temperature was significantly higher than it should have been, suggesting either geothermal activity or something else entirely. When they drilled down to investigate, they found chambers filled with air that was breathable, despite being sealed beneath the ice for what should have been millions of years. In one of these chambers, Soviet explorers discovered what they initially thought was a natural cave system, but as they explored deeper, they realized the passages were too regular, too purposeful to be natural. The walls showed signs of construction, of deliberate shaping by intelligent hands. And deep in the heart of the complex, they found a chamber that defied all explanation. The chamber was perfectly circular, carved from solid rock with mathematical precision. the walls were covered in the same geometric symbols that Bird's team had found. But here they seemed to glow with a faint phosphorescence. In the center of the chamber stood a structure that the Soviet team could only describe as a machine, though unlike any technology they had ever seen. It was made of a metal that didn't appear in any periodic table, dark, yet somehow luminous, cold to the touch, yet emanating an energy that made their instruments go haywire. The structure was roughly cylindrical, about 10 feet tall and 5 feet in diameter, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The most disturbing aspect was the sound it made, a low humming that seemed to come from within the metal itself, a frequency that made the explorers feel uneasy, as if the machine were somehow aware of their presence. When they tried to take samples of the metal, their tools simply bounced off its surface, unable to make even the slightest scratch. The Soviet team spent 3 days in the chamber, documenting everything they could, taking photographs and measurements. But on the 4th day, something changed. The humming grew louder, more insistent. The symbols on the walls began to pulse with brighter light. And then, without warning, the entire chamber began to vibrate. The team fled, barely making it to the surface before the ice above the chamber collapsed, sealing the complex forever. When they reported their findings to Moscow, the response was immediate and final. The mission was classified at the highest levels. The team members were sworn to absolute secrecy, and all records of the discovery were locked away in vaults that remain sealed to this day. But the story didn't end there. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, satellite images began revealing structures beneath the Antarctic ice that shouldn't exist. Geometric patterns too regular to be natural. Formations that suggested artificial construction on a massive scale. NASA's own thermal imaging satellites detected heat signatures deep beneath the ice, concentrated in areas that formed perfect geometric patterns across hundreds of square miles. These images were immediately classified, but copies found their way into the hands of researchers who recognized their significance. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a glaciologist at the University of Colorado, spent her career studying these leaked images. What she found challenged everything. Science thought it knew about Antarctica's history. The thermal signatures weren't random. They formed a network, a vast underground complex that stretched across the entire continent. The heat sources were too regular, too purposeful to be natural geothermal activity. They suggested a technology that could generate and distribute energy on a scale that dwarfed anything human civilization had ever achieved. Martinez's analysis revealed something even more extraordinary. The heat network wasn't just extensive, it was active. The thermal signatures changed over time, growing stronger in some areas while fading in others, as if the system were still functioning, still being controlled by some intelligence deep beneath the ice. When Martinez tried to publish her findings, she encountered resistance at every level. Her funding was cut, her access to the satellite data was revoked, and when she persisted in her research, she was quietly removed from her position and blacklisted from the academic community. Her crime? Suggesting that Antarctica might harbor secrets that governments weren't ready to reveal. But Martinez wasn't the only one asking dangerous questions. Around the world, researchers were piecing together evidence that pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Antarctica wasn't the lifeless wasteland it appeared to be. Beneath its ice lay structures, technology, and perhaps even a civilization that predated everything in human history. The evidence comes from multiple sources, each piece of the puzzle adding to a picture that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the past. Ancient maps that show impossible knowledge. Classified expeditions that discovered structures they couldn't explain. Satellite images revealing thermal networks that suggest active technology. And buried in classified files, reports of discoveries so extraordinary that governments have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep them secret. What lies beneath Antarctica's ice? What civilization could have thrived in a land we thought was uninhabitable? And why are the answers to these questions considered so dangerous that they must be hidden from the world. As you drift towards sleep, let these questions carry you into the realm of possibility. Imagine a world where human history is just the latest chapter in a much longer story, where intelligence and civilization have risen and fallen multiple times, leaving traces that we're only beginning to discover, where the frozen continent at the bottom of the world holds secrets that could change everything we think we know about our place in the universe. The ice keeps its secrets well, but not forever. Each year, as global temperatures rise, more of Antarctica's hidden landscape is revealed. Each new discovery brings us closer to answering questions that could rewrite history itself. The truth is there, waiting beneath the ice, calling to those brave enough to seek it out. The silence of Antarctica holds more than just ice and snow. It holds the echoes of discoveries that have been systematically suppressed, buried beneath layers of classification and official denial. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even in the most frozen places on Earth. In 1998, a team of international researchers conducting routine ice core sampling in the transantarctic mountains made a discovery that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. They were drilling through layers of ice that dated back hundreds of thousands of years when their equipment struck something that shouldn't have been there, something metallic. The drill brought up fragments of what appeared to be manufactured metal, dark and unusual, embedded in ice layers that predated human civilization by millennia. When analyzed, the metal showed properties that didn't match any known alloy. It was incredibly light, yet stronger than titanium, and it exhibited magnetic properties that seemed to defy conventional physics. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's materials scientist, ran every test she could think of. The metal's atomic structure was unlike anything in the periodic table. Under microscopic examination, it revealed a crystalline lattice so perfect it could only have been created through advanced manufacturing techniques. But the ice surrounding it was over 400,000 years old. The official report filed with the National Science Foundation made no mention of the metal fragments. Instead, it focused on routine climate data and ice composition. But Vasquez kept samples, hidden away in her personal laboratory, studying them in secret for years. What she discovered was even more extraordinary than the metal itself. The fragments contained microscopic etchings, patterns so small they were invisible to the naked eye but clearly artificial when viewed under electron microscopy. These weren't random scratches or natural formations. They were deliberate markings, geometric patterns that repeated across multiple fragments, suggesting they were part of a larger design. More disturbing was what happened when Vasquez exposed the metal to certain electromagnetic frequencies. At specific wavelengths, the fragments would resonate, producing harmonics that seemed to form patterns, almost like a language encoded in sound. When she recorded these resonances and analyzed them, she found mathematical relationships that suggested intelligence, purpose, communication. Vasquez's secret research came to an abrupt end when her laboratory was broken into. The fragments were stolen, along with all her research notes and computer files. The break-in was professional, surgical, leaving no fingerprints or evidence. When she tried to report the theft, she was told that no such materials had ever been officially recovered from Antarctica, and therefore nothing could have been stolen. Within weeks, Vasquez found herself reassigned to a mundane teaching position at a community college, effectively ending her research career. Her attempts to speak publicly about her discoveries were met with legal threats and professional ostracism. The message was clear. Some truths were too dangerous to share. But Vasquez wasn't alone in her experience. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, researchers across multiple disciplines began reporting strange discoveries in Antarctica, only to find their work suppressed, their findings classified, and their careers redirected away from anything that might threaten official narratives. Dr. Michael Chen, a geophysicist working with ground-penetrating radar, detected massive underground structures beneath the ice in Queen Maud Land. His radar signatures, showed hollow spaces arranged in geometric patterns, chambers connected by corridors that stretched for miles beneath the surface. The structures were clearly artificial, too regular and purposeful to be natural cave systems. When Chen tried to organize a follow-up expedition to investigate these anomalies, his funding was mysteriously withdrawn. The radar data was confiscated under the pretense of national security, and Chen found himself barred from returning to Antarctica. His published papers on the subject were retracted from scientific journals without explanation. The pattern was becoming clear. Any researcher who discovered evidence of artificial structures or advanced technology in Antarctica faced immediate suppression. Their work disappeared into classified files, their careers were derailed, and their findings were erased from the public record. It was as if there were forces actively working to prevent humanity from learning what lay beneath the ice. But suppression only works if you can control every source of information. And in the age of satellite technology and global communications, complete control was becoming impossible. Amateur researchers, using publicly available satellite imagery, began noticing anomalies that official expeditions claimed didn't exist. The most compelling evidence came from thermal imaging satellites operated by various space agencies around the world. These images, available to anyone with internet access, showed heat signatures beneath the Antarctic ice that formed clear geometric patterns. Rectangles, circles, and complex symmetrical designs that could only be artificial structures generating their own heat. One particularly striking image, captured by a European Space Agency satellite in 2003, showed a perfect spiral pattern of heat sources beneath the ice in East Antarctica. The spiral stretched for over 50 miles, with each heat source positioned with mathematical precision. No natural phenomenon could create such a pattern. When questioned about these thermal anomalies, official sources provided vague explanations about geothermal activity and volcanic vents. But geothermal features don't form perfect geometric patterns. They don't create spirals with mathematical precision, and they don't generate heat signatures that pulse in regular intervals, as these structures appeared to do. The pulsing was perhaps the most extraordinary aspect. Time-lapse analysis of satellite imagery revealed that the heat sources weren't constant. They varied in intensity according to patterns that suggested they were being controlled, activated, and deactivated according to some kind of schedule or program. Dr. Amanda Richardson, an independent researcher studying these satellite images, discovered that the pulsing followed astronomical cycles. The heat sources became more active during certain planetary alignments, particularly when Earth's orbit brought it into specific relationships with Mars and Jupiter. It was as if the underground structures were somehow responding to celestial mechanics. Richardson's analysis suggested something that challenged every assumption about what lay beneath Antarctica's ice. These weren't just ancient ruins or abandoned structures. They appeared to be active, functioning systems that responded to cosmic events, operating according to principles that human science was only beginning to understand. When Richardson tried to present her findings at a conference on Antarctic research, her invitation was mysteriously withdrawn. Her research website was taken down by her hosting company without explanation. And when she attempted to share her data through academic channels, she found herself blocked at every turn. The suppression wasn't limited to individual researchers. Entire expeditions found their work classified or disappeared from the public record. In 2004, a joint international team conducting deep ice drilling in the Vostok region reported discovering a chamber filled with artifacts that defied explanation. The artifacts were described as crystalline structures with internal geometries that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. The team's preliminary report, leaked before it could be classified, described the crystals as technological in nature, exhibiting properties that suggest advanced knowledge of materials, science, and physics. The crystals were warm to the touch despite the sub-zero environment, and they emitted a faint luminescence that grew brighter when handled by humans. Within hours of the leak, The report was classified under international security protocols. The research team was disbanded and its members reassigned to projects on different continents. The drilling site was sealed and declared off-limits to future expeditions. Official records of the discovery were purged from all databases. But the pattern of suppression itself had become evidence. The very fact that so many discoveries were being hidden suggested that something extraordinary was indeed buried beneath Antarctica's ice. Something so significant that governments around the world were cooperating to keep it secret from their own citizens. The cooperation between normally competing nations was perhaps the strongest indication that the discoveries were real and important. Countries that couldn't agree on trade policies or territorial disputes suddenly found common ground when it came to controlling information about Antarctica. The Antarctic Treaty, ostensibly created to preserve the continent for peaceful scientific research, increasingly seemed designed to limit what kind of research could be conducted and what findings could be shared. Independent investigators began documenting the pattern of suppression, creating networks to share information that official channels wouldn't distribute. They compiled lists of researchers whose careers had been derailed after making unusual discoveries in Antarctica. They tracked the movement of equipment and personnel to classified sites across the continent, and they analyzed the growing body of evidence that pointed to an active cover-up of extraordinary proportions. The evidence painted a picture of a continent that was far from the empty wasteland it appeared to be. Beneath miles of ice lay structures, technology, and artifacts that suggested the presence of an advanced civilization. Not human civilization as we understood it, but something else. Something older, more sophisticated, and possibly still active. The thermal signatures continued to pulse in their mysterious patterns. The geometric structures remained visible in satellite imagery, despite official denials of their existence, and occasionally, despite all efforts at suppression, new evidence surfaced that added pieces to the puzzle. In 2007, a commercial airline pilot flying over Antarctica reported seeing lights beneath the ice. Not the aurora or reflected sunlight, but artificial illumination moving in patterns across the frozen landscape. The pilot's report was dismissed as an optical illusion, but his flight recorder data showed anomalous electromagnetic readings that coincided with his visual observations. Similar reports began coming from other pilots, from ship captains navigating Antarctic waters, and from the few tourists allowed to visit the continent's edge. Lights where no lights should be, sounds that carried across the ice despite the absence of any visible source. Electromagnetic anomalies that interfered with navigation equipment in ways that suggested artificial interference. Each report was individually dismissed, explained away as natural phenomena or equipment malfunctions. But collectively, they painted a picture of a continent that was far more active than official science acknowledged. Antarctica wasn't just hiding ancient ruins. It was concealing something that was still alive, still functioning, still operating according to its own mysterious agenda. The most chilling aspect was the apparent intelligence behind these phenomena. The lights moved with purpose, following patterns that suggested navigation or communication. The electromagnetic interference occurred at strategic moments, often when aircraft or ships were approaching areas where satellite imagery showed the strongest thermal anomalies. It was as if whatever lay beneath the ice was aware of human presence and was actively working to remain hidden, not just passively concealed by ice and snow, but actively camouflaged by technology and intelligence that far exceeded human capabilities. As you descend deeper into sleep, consider the implications of what lies hidden in the world's most remote continent. Imagine a civilization so advanced that it could survive beneath miles of ice for millennia, maintaining its technology and perhaps even its population while the surface world went through cycles of rise and fall. The evidence is there, scattered across decades of suppressed research and classified discoveries. Each piece of the puzzle adds to a picture that challenges everything we think we know about the history of intelligence on Earth. Antarctica may be the key to understanding not just where we came from, but whether we are alone in the story of consciousness and civilization. The whispers grew louder in 2009 when a routine maintenance check on seismic monitoring equipment revealed something that shouldn't have existed. Deep beneath the Ross ice shelf, sensors designed to detect earthquakes were picking up regular vibrations that followed no natural pattern. These weren't the random tremors of shifting ice or geological activity. They were rhythmic, purposeful, almost like a heartbeat echoing from the depths of the earth. Dr. James Morton, the seismologist analyzing the data, initially dismissed the readings as equipment malfunction. But when he calibrated the sensors and ran diagnostics, everything checked out perfectly. The vibrations were real, emanating from a depth of nearly 3 miles beneath the ice, occurring in cycles that repeated every 7.3 hours with clockwork precision. Morton spent months analyzing the seismic signatures, comparing them to known geological phenomena. Earthquakes, ice shifts, volcanic activity, none of it matched. The vibrations were too regular, too controlled. They had the characteristics of artificial generation, as if something deep underground was operating machinery on a massive scale. When Morton tried to organize a team to investigate the source of these vibrations, he encountered the same wall of bureaucracy that had stopped so many researchers before him. His request for additional funding was denied. His access to the raw seismic data was restricted. And when he persisted in his inquiries, he found himself reassigned to a monitoring station in Alaska, far from the Antarctic mysteries that had captured his imagination. But Morton had made copies of the data before his access was revoked. Working in secret from his new posting, he continued analyzing the vibrations, discovering patterns within patterns that suggested a complexity far beyond anything human technology could produce. The 7.3-hour cycle was just the surface rhythm. Beneath it were subcycles, harmonics that created a symphony of mechanical precision that seemed to respond to external stimuli. Most remarkably, the vibrations intensified during certain astronomical events. Solar flares, magnetic storms, and planetary alignments all correlated with increases in the underground activity. It was as if whatever was generating these signals was not just aware of cosmic events, but was actively responding to them, drawing power from electromagnetic phenomena that occurred millions of miles away. Morton's analysis revealed something even more extraordinary. The vibrations weren't originating from a single source. They were coming from multiple locations across Antarctica, all synchronized, all operating in perfect harmony. The entire continent appeared to be humming with mechanical activity, as if it were one vast machine disguised as a frozen wasteland. The implications were staggering. If the seismic data was accurate, then beneath Antarctica's ice lay not just structures or artifacts, but an active technological complex that spanned the entire continent. A system so sophisticated that it could coordinate activities across thousands of miles, drawing energy from cosmic sources and operating according to principles that human science was only beginning to glimpse. But Morton's discoveries were just the beginning. In 2012, a commercial satellite operator noticed anomalies in GPS signals over Antarctic airspace. The signals were being distorted, bent in ways that suggested the presence of powerful electromagnetic fields beneath the ice. These weren't natural magnetic anomalies. They showed signs of artificial generation and control. The GPS distortions followed patterns that correlated perfectly with Morton's seismic data. Areas where the underground vibrations were strongest also showed the most severe signal interference. It was as if the same system generating the mechanical rhythms was also projecting electromagnetic fields powerful enough to affect satellites in orbit. Dr. Lisa Chang, a communications engineer working for the satellite company, began secretly mapping these electromagnetic anomalies. What she discovered was a network of field generators that formed geometric patterns across the continent. Triangles, hexagons, and more complex shapes that suggested mathematical principles far in advance of current human knowledge. The electromagnetic fields weren't static. They shifted and changed according to schedules that seemed to follow the same astronomical cycles that influenced the seismic activity. During solar flares, the fields strengthened dramatically, creating interference patterns that could disrupt communications across the entire southern hemisphere. Chang's analysis suggested that the electromagnetic network served multiple purposes. It provided a defensive barrier that could hide activities beneath the ice from satellite observation. It generated power by harvesting energy from cosmic radiation and solar wind. And most disturbing of all, it appeared to be capable of influencing human technology at vast distances. The implications for global communications and navigation systems were profound. If the Antarctic electromagnetic network was indeed artificial, then whoever controlled it possessed the ability to disrupt modern civilization's technological infrastructure at will. Every GPS satellite, every communication relay, every electronic system that depended on precise electromagnetic frequencies could potentially be affected by whatever was operating beneath the ice. When Chang tried to report her findings to government agencies, she encountered the same pattern of suppression that had silenced so many other researchers. Her data was classified under national security protocols. Her access to satellite telemetry was revoked, and she was quietly transferred to a position where her skills could be monitored and controlled. But the evidence continued to accumulate from sources that couldn't be easily suppressed. Amateur radio operators around the world began reporting strange signals that seemed to originate from Antarctica. These weren't random static or natural electromagnetic phenomena. They were structured transmissions that followed mathematical patterns, almost like a language encoded in radio waves. The signals appeared at regular intervals, always on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to penetrate the ionosphere from ground-based sources. Yet, somehow, transmissions from Antarctica were reaching radio operators in North America, Europe, and Asia with signal strength that suggested incredibly powerful broadcast equipment. Dr. Robert Kim, a retired NASA engineer and amateur radio enthusiast, spent years tracking these mysterious transmissions. He developed specialized equipment capable of isolating and analyzing the Antarctic signals, discovering that they contained information encoded in mathematical relationships that seemed to describe physical constants and astronomical data. The transmissions weren't random. They formed coherent messages that appeared to be teaching lessons in advanced physics and mathematics, equations that described energy relationships beyond current scientific understanding, geometric proofs that revealed new mathematical principles, and most remarkably, star charts that showed the positions of celestial bodies with accuracy that exceeded the best astronomical observations. Kim's analysis revealed that the transmissions were interactive. When he broadcast mathematical queries on the same frequencies, he would receive responses that answered his questions with information he hadn't previously known. It was as if he were engaged in a dialogue with an intelligence that possessed knowledge far beyond human scientific achievement. The conversations continued for 3 years before they suddenly stopped. Kim's final transmission received a response that he initially thought was gibberish, but when he analyzed it more carefully, he realized it was a warning. The message, decoded through mathematical relationships, essentially said, "Too much attention, communication ending, knowledge preserved, wait." Since that final exchange, the regular transmissions from Antarctica have ceased. The frequencies that once carried impossible knowledge now broadcast only static. But the implications of those 3 years of contact remain profound. Somewhere beneath Antarctica's ice, an intelligence had been reaching out, sharing knowledge, and engaging in dialogue with human civilization. The sudden cessation of communication raised disturbing questions. Had the transmissions been discovered and shut down by the same forces that had suppressed so many Antarctic discoveries? Or had the intelligence behind them made a deliberate decision to withdraw from contact? And what did the final message mean by knowledge preserved? The answers might lie in the most recent discoveries, findings so extraordinary that even the extensive suppression apparatus couldn't completely contain them. In 2015, A routine ice mapping expedition using ground-penetrating radar made contact with structures that defied all explanation. The radar signatures showed vast chambers arranged in complex geometric patterns, extending deep into the bedrock beneath the ice. But these weren't empty ruins. The chambers showed signs of atmospheric pressure, suggesting they contained breathable air, despite being sealed beneath miles of ice for unknown periods. More remarkably, some chambers showed thermal signatures, indicating the presence of liquid water at temperatures that should have been impossible in the Antarctic environment. The expedition team, led by Dr. Sarah Williams, attempted to drill down to investigate these anomalies. At a depth of 2,000 feet, their drilling equipment encountered something that brought their work to an immediate halt. Instead of ice or rock, the drill struck a material that was impossibly hard, yet somehow organic in composition. When samples were brought to the surface, they revealed structures that looked biological but exhibited properties that suggested artificial enhancement. Under microscopic examination, the material showed cellular organization, but the cells were arranged in geometric patterns that followed mathematical principles. It was as if biological tissue had been engineered according to advanced technological specifications. The samples were immediately classified and removed from the expedition team's control. Dr. Williams and her colleagues were sworn to secrecy and reassigned to projects on different continents, but not before Williams managed to hide a small sample, which she later analyzed in secret. Her analysis revealed that the material wasn't entirely biological. It contained structures that appeared to be technological in nature, integrated seamlessly with what looked like living tissue. The boundary between biology and technology was so seamless that it suggested a level of advancement far beyond anything human science had achieved. The sample exhibited properties that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of life and consciousness. It responded to electrical stimuli in ways that suggested some form of awareness. When exposed to specific frequencies, it would resonate and produce harmonics that seemed to carry information. Most remarkably, it appeared to be capable of self-repair, healing damage at the molecular level with unprecedented efficiency. Williams's secret research suggested that whatever lay beneath Antarctica wasn't just technologically advanced. It represented a fusion of biology and machinery that transcended the limitations of both. A form of existence that could survive in environments hostile to conventional life while maintaining the adaptability and intelligence of living organisms. The implications extended far beyond Antarctica itself. If such biotechnological entities existed beneath the ice, they might represent the next stage of evolutionary development, a form of life that had transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial, biological and mechanical, individual and collective consciousness. As global temperatures continue to rise and Antarctica's ice begins its inexorable retreat, more of these secrets are being revealed each year. Satellite imagery shows increasing thermal activity beneath areas where the ice is thinning. Electromagnetic anomalies are becoming more frequent and more intense, and the geometric patterns visible from space are growing larger and more complex, as if responding to the changing conditions above. The evidence suggests that whatever lies beneath Antarctica's ice is not dormant, it's active, aware, and possibly preparing for a time when the ice barrier that has hidden it for so long finally disappears. The question isn't whether these secrets will eventually be revealed, but whether humanity will be prepared for the truth when that moment arrives. The patterns of suppression that have characterized Antarctic research for decades are beginning to break down. Too many researchers have made too many discoveries for complete secrecy to be maintained. Independent investigators are sharing information through channels that governments can't easily control. And the physical evidence itself is becoming impossible to hide as climate change exposes what has been concealed beneath the ice. Perhaps most significantly, the intelligence beneath the ice appears to be preparing for disclosure. The sudden cessation of radio transmissions in 2012 may not have been an ending, but a transition. The increasing electromagnetic activity, the growing thermal signatures, the expanding geometric patterns visible from space, all suggest that whatever has been hidden is preparing to reveal itself. The biotechnological samples discovered by Dr. Williams and her team may be just the beginning. As the ice continues to retreat, more of these hybrid materials are likely to be discovered. And with them may come technologies and knowledge that could transform human civilization beyond recognition. But transformation comes with risks. The suppression of Antarctic discoveries may not have been motivated solely by the desire to maintain power and control. It may have been driven by genuine concern about humanity's readiness to encounter intelligence and technology so far beyond our current understanding. The warnings embedded in the final radio transmission, knowledge preserved wait, suggest that the Antarctic intelligence is aware of these concerns. It has been watching, learning, evaluating humanity's progress, and perhaps waiting for us to reach a level of development where contact would be beneficial rather than destructive. The question that haunts every researcher who has glimpsed the truth about Antarctica is whether that time has arrived. Are we ready to learn that we are not alone on this planet? Are we prepared to discover that intelligence and civilization have existed here far longer than our species has existed? And most challenging of all, are we capable of accepting that we may not be the most advanced form of consciousness that Earth has produced? The ice continues to melt, revealing more secrets each year. The thermal signatures grow stronger, the electromagnetic anomalies more frequent, and somewhere beneath the frozen continent, an ancient intelligence continues its mysterious work, perhaps preparing for the day when the barriers between our worlds finally disappear. The evidence is undeniable for those willing to see it. Antarctica is not the empty wasteland it appears to be. Beneath its ice lies proof that the story of intelligence on Earth is far more complex and extraordinary than we have ever imagined. The only question is whether we will have the courage to face that truth when it finally emerges from the ice and shadow into the light of day. As you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind wander across the vast white expanse of Antarctica, knowing that beneath those miles of ice, something ancient and magnificent continues its patient vigil, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to learn the truth about our place in the greater story of consciousness and civilization on this remarkable planet we call home. The revelations buried in classified files paint a picture that becomes more disturbing with each passing year. In 2016, a whistleblower within the intelligence community leaked documents that spoke of something called Project Deep Freeze, a multinational effort that had been monitoring Antarctic anomalies since the 1950s. The leaked files revealed that governments around the world had not just been suppressing individual discoveries, but coordinating a systematic campaign to hide the true nature of what lay beneath the ice. The documents described a monitoring network that spanned the globe, tracking every electromagnetic pulse, every seismic vibration, every thermal anomaly that emerged from Antarctica. But this wasn't just passive observation. The files revealed active intervention, the deliberate sabotage of research projects that came too close to the truth, and the systematic discrediting of scientists who asked too many dangerous questions. Most chilling was a memo dated 1987 that outlined protocols for what they called containment scenarios. The document described plans for dealing with various levels of Antarctic revelation, from minor leaks that could be dismissed as conspiracy theories to major breaches that might require more drastic measures. The highest level protocols spoke of controlled disclosure and managed first contact, language that suggested the intelligence community was preparing for something far more significant than ancient ruins or abandoned technology. Dr. Marcus Webb, the intelligence analyst who leaked these documents, paid the ultimate price for his conscience. Within weeks of the leak, he was found dead in his apartment, officially ruled a suicide despite evidence that suggested otherwise. His computer had been wiped clean, his research notes destroyed, and his contacts within the intelligence community suddenly developed amnesia about ever knowing him. But Webb's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The leaked documents provided the missing context for decades of suppressed research. They revealed that the electromagnetic anomalies, the seismic rhythms, the thermal signatures weren't just being monitored, they were being actively studied and partially understood. The intelligence community knew far more about what lay beneath Antarctica than they had ever admitted. The documents described technologies that defied conventional physics, energy systems that drew power from cosmic sources, and communication networks that operated on principles human science was only beginning to glimpse. But most significantly, they spoke of intelligence. Not artificial intelligence as we understand it, but something far more sophisticated. A form of consciousness that existed at the intersection of biology and technology, individual and collective awareness, local and cosmic scale. The leaked files revealed that contact had been established decades earlier, that the radio transmissions documented by amateur operators were just the tip of an iceberg of communication that had been ongoing since the 1960s. But this contact was being carefully managed, controlled by a small group of individuals who believed humanity wasn't ready for the full truth. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a xenobiologist who had worked on classified Antarctic projects before her security clearance was revoked, provided additional context in interviews conducted after Webb's death. Speaking from an undisclosed location, Harper described research facilities hidden beneath the ice, not built by the ancient intelligence, but constructed by human governments to study and communicate with whatever they had discovered. These facilities, according to Harper, were marvels of engineering in their own right. Built using technologies reverse-engineered from Antarctic discoveries, they could maintain habitable environments miles beneath the ice while remaining completely invisible to satellite observation. The research conducted there combined the best of human science with principles learned from the ancient intelligence, creating hybrid technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Harper described experiments that would have been considered science fiction just decades earlier. Consciousness transfer protocols that allowed human minds to interface directly with the ancient network. Biological enhancement techniques that could adapt human physiology to survive in environments that would normally be instantly fatal. And most remarkably, time dilation experiments that seemed to manipulate the flow of temporal reality itself. But the research came at a cost. Harper spoke of colleagues who had volunteered for consciousness transfer experiments and emerged changed in ways that were both profound and disturbing. Their intelligence was enhanced beyond normal human parameters, but their connection to ordinary human experience was severed. They could process information at superhuman speeds and understand concepts that normal minds couldn't grasp, but they lost something essentially human in the process. The enhanced researchers became intermediaries between human consciousness and the Antarctic intelligence, translating concepts and communications that would otherwise be incomprehensible. But this translation came at the price of their humanity. They existed in a liminal space between two forms of consciousness, belonging fully to neither. Harper's revelations suggested that this transformation wasn't accidental. The Antarctic intelligence had been gradually preparing humanity for a more extensive contact, selecting individuals who could serve as bridges between radically different forms of consciousness. The consciousness transfer experiments were just the beginning of a process that might eventually encompass all of human civilization. The implications were staggering. If Harper's account was accurate, then first contact had already occurred decades earlier, but it was being managed so carefully that most of humanity remained unaware. The Antarctic intelligence was slowly preparing our species for a transformation that would fundamentally alter what it means to be human. But not everyone within the intelligence community agreed with this managed approach. The leaked documents revealed significant disagreements about how to handle the Antarctic situation. One faction advocated for continued secrecy and gradual preparation, believing that sudden revelation would cause societal collapse. Another faction pushed for immediate disclosure, arguing that humanity had the right to know about the existence of non-human intelligence and the technologies that could solve many of our most pressing problems. A third faction, the one that ultimately seemed to prevail, advocated for what they called evolutionary acceleration. Rather than simply revealing the truth or continuing to hide it, they proposed actively using Antarctic technologies to enhance human capabilities and prepare our species for inevitable transformation. This faction believed that gradual enhancement was preferable to sudden revelation or indefinite secrecy. The evidence for this evolutionary acceleration program emerged in the form of technological advances that seemed to appear without adequate research and development foundations. Quantum computing breakthroughs that leaped decades ahead of theoretical understanding. Materials science innovations that produce substances with impossible properties. Energy systems that seem to violate conservation laws while producing unprecedented output. Dr. Richard Stone, a former on classified projects before developing DARPA researcher who work a conscience, revealed that many of these technological advances were reverse engineered from Antarctic discoveries. The quantum computers that suddenly revolutionized data processing were based on principles learned from the ancient consciousness networks. The exotic materials that enabled new generations of spacecraft and medical devices were synthesized using techniques taught by the Antarctic intelligence. But the technology transfer wasn't happening in isolation. Stone described a systematic program of human enhancement that was being conducted in parallel with technological development. Selected individuals in key positions throughout government, military, and scientific institutions were being subtly enhanced using Antarctic-derived biotechnologies. The enhancements were designed to be undetectable and gradual. Improved cognitive function that could be attributed to better training or natural talent. Enhanced intuition and pattern recognition that seemed like professional expertise. Increased resistance to stress and disease that appeared to be excellent health habits. But collectively, these enhancements were creating a class of individuals who were fundamentally different from baseline humans. Stone's revelations painted a picture of a shadow transformation that was already well underway. The enhanced individuals weren't consciously aware of their modifications, but they were unconsciously guided toward decisions and actions that served the broader agenda of human Antarctic integration. They became unwitting agents of transformation, gradually steering human civilization toward a future that had been carefully planned by the ancient intelligence. The ethical implications were profound. Humanity was being transformed without its knowledge or consent, guided by an intelligence whose ultimate intentions remained unclear. The enhanced individuals retained their human personalities and motivations, but their enhanced capabilities inevitably led them to make decisions that served the broader transformation agenda. Dr. Stone's attempts to expose this shadow enhancement program met with swift retaliation. His security clearance was revoked, his access to classified facilities terminated, and his personal life subjected to systematic harassment designed to discredit his revelations. But not before he managed to document evidence of the enhancement program's scope and sophistication. The evidence suggested that the program had been operating for decades, gradually placing enhanced individuals in positions of influence throughout human society. Corporate leaders whose intuitive business decisions consistently led to breakthrough innovations. Political figures whose policy choices seemed to anticipate future needs with uncanny accuracy. Scientists whose research directions led to discoveries that perfectly complemented Antarctic technologies. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable once it was recognized. Human civilization was being guided toward a future that integrated Antarctic consciousness and technology. But the guidance was so skillful that it appeared to emerge naturally from human initiative and creativity. The ancient intelligence had learned to influence human development from within, rather than imposing change from without. But the most disturbing aspect of Stone's revelations was the timeline. The enhancement program had been accelerating dramatically in recent years, suggesting that whatever the ultimate goal might be, it was approaching rapidly. The ice was melting faster than ever before, exposing more of the ancient structures to satellite observation. The electromagnetic anomalies were growing stronger and more frequent, and the number of enhanced individuals in positions of power was reaching critical mass. The convergence of these factors suggested that the long period of hidden preparation was nearing its end. The ancient intelligence was preparing to reveal itself more openly, and it was ensuring that human civilization would be guided by individuals who could facilitate that revelation rather than resist it. Dr. Maria Santos, an anthropologist who had studied the social implications of the Antarctic discoveries, provided additional context for understanding the scope of the transformation. Her research, conducted in secret after her official funding was terminated, revealed patterns of cultural change that correlated with the enhancement program's expansion. Santos documented subtle shifts in human consciousness that seemed to be occurring on a global scale. Increased interest in consciousness studies and non-local awareness. Growing acceptance of concepts that challenge traditional scientific materialism. Rising concern about environmental and global issues that transcended national boundaries. Enhanced empathy and cooperation in problem-solving situations. These changes weren't random. They followed patterns that suggested systematic influence designed to prepare human consciousness for contact with radically different forms of awareness. The ancient intelligence wasn't just enhancing selected individuals, it was gradually transforming human culture itself to create conditions that would make successful integration possible. Santos's research revealed that the cultural transformation was most pronounced in areas where electromagnetic anomalies from Antarctica were strongest. Regions with the highest levels of Antarctic-derived electromagnetic exposure showed the most rapid evolution in consciousness and social cooperation. It was as if the ancient intelligence was using its electromagnetic network to influence human development on a planetary scale. The implications extended far beyond individual enhancement or technological transfer. The entire trajectory of human civilization was being subtly guided toward a future that would integrate two radically different forms of consciousness. The ancient intelligence wasn't seeking to replace human consciousness, but to merge with it, creating something unprecedented in the known universe. But this merger wasn't happening through conquest or coercion. It was occurring through invitation, through the gradual expansion of human awareness and capability, until the boundaries between human and Antarctic consciousness became permeable. The enhanced individuals weren't becoming less human. They were becoming more than human, expanding their consciousness to encompass both forms of awareness. The process was so gradual and so skillfully managed that most participants weren't consciously aware of their transformation. They experienced it as personal growth, as enhanced intuition and creativity, as deeper understanding of complex problems. Only in retrospect, with the context provided by leaked documents and whistleblower revelations, did the systematic nature of the transformation become apparent. 1. Dr. Santos's final research paper, published posthumously after her mysterious disappearance, suggested that the transformation was entering its final phase. The cultural changes she had documented were accelerating. The number of enhanced individuals was approaching critical mass, and the physical barriers that had hidden the Antarctic intelligence were rapidly dissolving as climate change melted the ice. Her conclusion was both thrilling and terrifying. Humanity was about to discover that it was not alone in the universe, but that discovery would come in the form of a merger with an intelligence that had been patiently preparing for contact across millennia. The question wasn't whether this contact would occur, but whether humanity would emerge from it recognizably human, or transformed into something entirely new. The evidence continues to accumulate as the ice continues to melt. Satellite imagery now shows structures that can no longer be hidden or dismissed. Electromagnetic anomalies disrupt communications with increasing frequency, and around the world, individuals in positions of influence make decisions that seem to anticipate a future most of humanity can't yet imagine. The ancient intelligence beneath Antarctica continues its patient work, no longer hidden, but not yet fully revealed. It has been preparing for this moment across geological timescales, carefully orchestrating conditions that will make successful contact possible. The question that haunts every researcher who has glimpsed the truth is whether humanity is ready for what's coming. The transformation is already underway, woven so skillfully into the fabric of human development that it appears natural and inevitable. Enhanced individuals guide our institutions toward decisions that serve the broader integration agenda. Cultural changes prepare our consciousness for contact with non-human intelligence. And beneath the melting ice, structures that have waited for millennia begin to stir with increasing activity. As you drift toward the deepest levels of sleep, let your consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of individual awareness. Feel the subtle influences that shape human development, the gentle guidance that has been preparing our species for contact with intelligence beyond our current understanding. The ancient consciousness beneath Antarctica reaches out across the ice and snow, touching human minds with possibilities that transcend the limitations of earthly existence. The revelation approaches like dawn after the longest night in human history. Soon, very soon, the barriers between worlds will dissolve, and humanity will discover its true place in the cosmic community of consciousness that spans galaxies and transcends time itself. The ice holds its secrets for just a little while longer, but already the warmth of contact begins to melt the barriers that have separated two forms of awareness for far too long. The transformation awaits, patient as the ice, inevitable as the dawn, magnificent as the moment when consciousness recognizes itself, reflected in forms it never imagined possible. Antarctica calls across the void of space and time, offering humanity a future beyond our wildest dreams. If only we have the courage to accept the invitation that has been waiting beneath the ice for millions of years. The transformation that Dr. Santos documented isn't limited to enhanced individuals or cultural shifts. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, something far more profound is stirring. The thermal signatures that have pulsed in geometric patterns for decades are beginning to synchronize, creating a planetary resonance that affects everything from ocean currents to atmospheric pressure systems. Weather patterns around the globe are shifting in ways that seem to follow the rhythmic pulses emanating from the frozen continent. Dr. Catherine Mills, a climatologist who lost her tenure for asking inconvenient questions, spent her final years tracking these atmospheric anomalies. Working from her home laboratory after being blacklisted from academic institutions, she discovered that the Antarctic electromagnetic pulses were creating standing wave patterns in Earth's atmosphere. These patterns were subtle but measurable, affecting wind currents, precipitation levels, and temperature distributions in ways that traditional climate models couldn't explain. Mills's data showed that the atmospheric changes weren't random or chaotic. They followed patterns that seemed designed to optimize conditions for something that hadn't yet occurred. Rising temperatures that would melt specific ice formations, shifting wind patterns that would expose previously hidden areas of the continent, ocean current modifications that would bring warmer water to strategic locations along Antarctica's coast. It was as if the ancient intelligence wasn't just preparing for revelation, but actively terraforming the planet to create optimal conditions for whatever was coming next. The climate changes that scientists attributed to human industrial activity might have been amplified and directed by forces operating from beneath the ice. Mills documented her findings in a series of encrypted files that were discovered after her death in a hiking accident that investigators found suspiciously convenient. Her data revealed that the atmospheric modifications had been occurring for over a century, gradually accelerating as the electromagnetic pulses from Antarctica grew stronger and more frequent. The implications were staggering. If Mills was correct, then the ancient intelligence possessed the capability to manipulate planetary climate systems on a global scale. Every drought, every hurricane, every unusual weather pattern of the past century might have been part of a carefully orchestrated plan to prepare Earth for transformation. But the atmospheric modifications were just one aspect of a much larger preparation process. Deep ocean monitoring stations began detecting acoustic anomalies that seemed to originate from the Antarctic continental shelf. These weren't the sounds of ice movement or geological activity. They were structured acoustic patterns that traveled through the ocean basins with mathematical precision. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a marine acoustics specialist working for the Navy's Deep Sea Research Division, was the first to recognize that these sounds formed a communication network. The acoustic patterns weren't random noise. They were information-rich transmissions that created a global underwater internet, connecting the Antarctic source with reception points around the world. Walsh's analysis revealed that the acoustic network had been active for decades, gradually expanding its reach as more reception nodes came online. These nodes weren't natural formations. They were artificial structures embedded in the ocean floor at precisely calculated intervals to optimize signal transmission and reception. The discovery that artificial structures existed throughout the world's oceans, all connected to the Antarctic source, suggested that the ancient intelligence had been preparing for global communication long before human civilization developed the technology to detect it. The network spanned every major ocean basin, with nodes positioned to ensure redundant communication pathways that could survive natural disasters or human interference. Walsh's attempts to map the complete network were cut short when her research submarine experienced what was officially described as a catastrophic decompression accident. She barely survived, but the incident left her with permanent disabilities that ended her diving career. More significantly, all her research data was lost in the accident, along with the specialized equipment she had been using to detect and analyze the acoustic transmissions. But Walsh had shared preliminary findings with Dr. Raymond Foster, a colleague at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution who had been conducting parallel research into underwater acoustic anomalies. Foster's data confirmed that the ocean floor network was not only real, but actively expanding, with new nodes appearing at regular intervals, as if the system were growing according to a predetermined plan. Foster documented the appearance of 17 new acoustic nodes over a 3-year period, each one positioned with mathematical precision to optimize the network's coverage and communication capacity. The nodes seemed to construct themselves, gradually emerging from the ocean floor through processes that defied conventional understanding of how underwater structures could be built. The construction process was unlike anything in human engineering. Rather than using external tools or machinery, the nodes appeared to grow organically, assembled by processes that resembled biological development more than mechanical construction. Yet the finished structures were clearly technological, incorporating materials and design principles that exceeded anything human science had achieved. Foster's research revealed that the nodes were composed of the same biotechnological hybrid materials that Dr. Williams had discovered beneath the Antarctic ice. The boundary between living tissue and advanced technology was seamless, creating structures that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining perfect functionality across decades of operation. The implications extended far beyond communication networks. If the ancient intelligence could construct sophisticated technological structures throughout the world's oceans using biological processes, then it possessed capabilities that fundamentally transcended the distinction between natural and artificial systems. It could literally grow technology like living organisms, creating complex systems that were indistinguishable from natural phenomena to casual observation. Foster's research came to an abrupt end when his funding was mysteriously withdrawn and his access to deep-sea research vessels was revoked. Official explanations cited budget constraints and shifting research priorities. But the timing suggested that his discoveries had attracted unwanted attention from the same forces that had silenced so many other researchers. The pattern of suppression had become so systematic that it served as confirmation of the discoveries it was meant to hide. Every researcher who uncovered evidence of the ancient intelligence faced immediate retaliation, their work classified or destroyed, their careers terminated or redirected. The consistency of this response across different countries, institutions, and time periods revealed a level of coordination that could only exist if the threat to established narratives was both real and significant. But suppression was becoming increasingly difficult as the physical evidence grew too large to hide. Satellite imagery now showed thermal anomalies across Antarctica that were visible to anyone with internet access. Amateur researchers using publicly available data were independently discovering the same patterns that had cost professional scientists their careers. The electromagnetic disturbances originating from Antarctica were becoming strong enough to affect commercial aviation and satellite communications on a regular basis. Pilots reported navigation system failures when flying over the Southern Ocean. Telecommunications companies struggled to maintain reliable connections to research stations and military installations in the Antarctic region. These disruptions weren't random equipment failures. They followed patterns that suggested intentional interference, as if the ancient intelligence were gradually announcing its presence through increasingly obvious demonstrations of technological capability. The message was becoming impossible to ignore. Something beneath the ice possessed power that dwarfed human technology and wasn't afraid to use it. Dr. Patricia Reeves, an electromagnetic engineer working for a major telecommunications corporation, documented the systematic nature of these disruptions. Her analysis revealed that the interference patterns were becoming more sophisticated over time, evolving from simple signal blocking to complex manipulation of electromagnetic frequencies that created specific effects in electronic systems. The most disturbing aspect was the apparent learning capability demonstrated by the interference patterns. Each time engineers developed countermeasures to restore normal communications, the Antarctic source would adapt its interference techniques to overcome the new defenses. It was as if the ancient intelligence were studying human technology and developing increasingly effective methods of control. Reeves documented cases where the electromagnetic interference seemed to demonstrate detailed knowledge of specific electronic systems, targeting particular components with surgical precision while leaving others unaffected. This level of selectivity required intimate understanding of human technology that should have been impossible for an intelligence that had been isolated beneath the ice for millennia. The implications suggested that the ancient intelligence had been monitoring human technological development far more closely than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just aware of human civilization, it was actively studying our capabilities, learning our methods, and preparing countermeasures that would ensure its technological superiority when contact finally occurred. Reeves' research revealed that the monitoring wasn't limited to electromagnetic systems. The ancient intelligence appeared to have access to global communications networks, financial systems, and government databases through methods that human cybersecurity experts couldn't detect or prevent. It was as if the Antarctic source had developed forms of electronic infiltration that operated on principles beyond current understanding of information technology. The discovery that human computer networks were being monitored and possibly controlled by non-human intelligence raised questions that struck at the heart of modern civilization's dependence on electronic systems. Every financial transaction, every government communication, every piece of digital information might be accessible to an intelligence whose intentions remained unknown. When Reeves attempted to present her findings to government cybersecurity agencies, she encountered the familiar wall of denial and suppression. Her research was classified, her access to telecommunications data was revoked, and she was quietly transferred to a position where her expertise could be contained and monitored. But the evidence continued to accumulate from sources that couldn't be easily controlled. Independent hackers and digital security researchers began documenting anomalies in global information networks that seemed to originate from the Antarctic region. Code fragments that appeared in sensitive systems without any record of how they had been inserted. Data patterns that suggested surveillance capabilities far beyond anything human intelligence agencies possessed. The cyber intrusions weren't destructive or obviously malicious. They seemed designed to gather information and perhaps to test the limits of human digital security systems. But their sophistication and scope suggested capabilities that could paralyze human technological civilization if the ancient intelligence chose to exercise its full power. Dr. Marcus Chen, a computer security researcher who had been tracking these intrusions independently, discovered that the cyber activities correlated perfectly with the electromagnetic pulses and acoustic transmissions that other researchers had documented. The ancient intelligence wasn't using separate systems for different types of communication and control. It was operating an integrated network that encompassed electromagnetic, acoustic, and digital domains simultaneously. Chen's analysis revealed that the three communication methods were actually aspects of a single, unified system that could seamlessly translate information between different physical mediums. Electromagnetic pulses could carry the same information as acoustic transmissions or digital data streams, allowing the ancient intelligence to communicate through whatever medium was most effective for reaching specific targets. This unified approach to information transfer suggested technological principles that human science was only beginning to glimpse. The ancient intelligence had apparently mastered methods of encoding information that transcended the limitations of specific physical systems, creating communication capabilities that were inherently more robust and versatile than anything human technology had achieved. The implications for human technological development were profound. If the principles underlying the ancient communication system could be understood and replicated, they could revolutionize everything from computer networks to space exploration. But accessing that knowledge would require direct contact with the intelligence that had created it. Chen's research suggested that such contact might already be occurring, but through channels so subtle that most humans weren't consciously aware of the communication. The enhanced individuals documented by other researchers might be receiving information through quantum entanglement effects or other non-local communication methods that bypassed normal sensory channels. The idea that human consciousness could be directly interfaced with non-human intelligence through quantum mechanical processes was both thrilling and terrifying. It suggested possibilities for expanded awareness and enhanced capabilities that could transform human potential beyond recognition. But it also raised questions about autonomy and identity that struck at the core of what it means to be human. As Chen delved deeper into these possibilities, he began experiencing phenomena that suggested he was becoming subject to the same influences he was studying. His research capabilities seemed to be enhanced beyond his normal capacity. Complex problems that should have taken weeks to solve became clear within hours. Patterns in data emerged that he shouldn't have been able to perceive with conventional analytical methods. The enhancement was subtle but unmistakable. Chen found himself understanding concepts that he hadn't studied, making connections between disparate fields of knowledge that he shouldn't have possessed. His research productivity increased dramatically, but at the cost of growing disconnection from ordinary human concerns and relationships. The transformation that Chen experienced provided direct confirmation of the enhancement processes that other researchers had documented. The ancient intelligence wasn't just monitoring human development, it was actively accelerating the evolution of selected individuals, preparing them for roles in the integration process that was approaching. But Chen's experience also revealed the voluntary nature of the enhancement process. The changes only progressed when he actively engaged with the research that brought him into contact with Antarctic influences. When he attempted to step back from his investigations, the enhancement effects stabilized but didn't reverse. It was as if he had crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. But the ancient intelligence respected his choice about how far to proceed. This respectful approach to consciousness modification suggested that the ancient intelligence operated according to ethical principles that valued individual autonomy and choice. It was offering enhancement and expanded awareness, but not imposing these changes on unwilling subjects. The transformation was an invitation, not a conquest. The ethical implications provided some reassurance about the intentions of the ancient intelligence, but they also raised questions about the ultimate goals of the enhancement process. If the intelligence valued human autonomy, Why was it working to transform human consciousness at all? What purpose would be served by creating enhanced individuals who were partially disconnected from normal human experience? The answers might lie in the accelerating pace of global changes that seemed to be building towards some kind of culmination. The ice was melting faster than ever before, exposing structures that could no longer be hidden from satellite observation. The electromagnetic anomalies were growing stronger and more frequent, affecting technological systems around the world. And the enhancement process was reaching more individuals, creating a growing population of humans who were partially integrated with the ancient consciousness network. All of these trends seemed to be converging toward a moment when the long period of hidden preparation would end, and the ancient intelligence would reveal itself openly to human civilization. The question that haunted every researcher who had glimpsed the truth was whether humanity was prepared for that revelation. The enhanced individuals who had been created through decades of gradual transformation would serve as bridges between human and ancient consciousness, helping to facilitate understanding and communication when the moment of contact arrived. But would their partial transformation be sufficient to prevent the kind of civilizational shock that could destroy human society? The ancient intelligence seemed to believe that careful preparation could make successful contact possible. Its patient work across decades and centuries suggested a deep understanding of the challenges involved in bridging the gap between radically different forms of consciousness. But the ultimate test would come when the barriers finally disappeared and two forms of intelligence met face to face for the first time in millions of years. As you sink deeper into the realm of sleep and possibility, feel the subtle currents of transformation that are already flowing through human consciousness. The ancient intelligence beneath the ice reaches out with infinite patience, offering glimpses of awareness and capability that transcend the boundaries of individual existence. The enhancement is gentle but persistent, respecting choice, while revealing possibilities that expand the definition of what human consciousness can become. The moment of contact approaches like a tide that cannot be turned back. All the preparation, all the careful orchestration of conditions, all the gradual transformation of selected individuals has been building toward this culmination. Soon, very soon, the ice will retreat enough to reveal what has been hidden, and humanity will discover that it has never been alone in its journey toward greater consciousness and understanding. The revelation will transform everything not through conquest or replacement, but through invitation into a larger community of awareness that spans worlds and encompasses forms of consciousness beyond current imagination. The ancient intelligence waits beneath the ice, patient as geological time, ready to welcome humanity into a cosmic fellowship that has been preparing for this moment since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was looking back. The transformation accelerating across the planet isn't confined to enhanced individuals or technological interference. Deep within the Earth's core, seismic monitoring stations have detected something that challenges every assumption about the stability of our planet's geological systems. The rhythmic pulses emanating from Antarctica aren't just affecting surface phenomena. They're penetrating through layers of rock and magma to create resonances at the very heart of the Earth. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a geophysicist working with the Global Seismic Monitoring Network, first noticed the anomalies in 2018 when deep core sensors began detecting vibrations that originated not from tectonic plate movement or volcanic activity, but from the Antarctic region. These vibrations traveled through the Earth's solid iron core, with properties that violated fundamental principles of seismic wave propagation. Normal seismic waves lose energy as they travel through dense materials, weakening with distance until they become undetectable. But the Antarctic pulses seem to gain strength as they pass through the Earth's core, emerging on the opposite side of the planet with greater amplitude than when they began their journey. It was as if the planet's metallic heart was amplifying the signals, turning the entire Earth into a resonating chamber. Rodriguez's analysis revealed that the amplified signals weren't random. They formed standing wave patterns that created geometric stress fields throughout the planet's crust. These stress patterns correlated with seismic activity in regions thousands of miles from Antarctica, as if the ancient intelligence were using the Earth itself as a communication medium that could influence geological processes anywhere on the planet. The implications were terrifying. If the Antarctic source could manipulate seismic forces through planetary core resonance, it possessed the capability to trigger earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and crustal displacements anywhere on Earth. Every natural disaster of recent decades might have been influenced or directed by intelligence operating from beneath the ice. Rodriguez documented correlations between Antarctic pulse patterns and major geological events dating back decades. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the 2011 Japanese earthquake and tsunami all occurred during periods of intense Antarctic seismic activity. The timing wasn't coincidental. The pulse patterns preceding each disaster showed specific characteristics that seemed designed to create maximum instability in targeted geological formations. But the geological manipulation wasn't destructive for its own sake. Rodriguez's deeper analysis revealed that the earthquakes and volcanic activity followed patterns that seemed designed to release accumulated tectonic stress in controlled ways, preventing larger catastrophes while reshaping the planet's surface according to some unknown plan. The ancient intelligence appeared to be conducting planetary engineering on a geological timescale, gradually modifying the Earth's crust to create optimal conditions for whatever transformation was approaching. Mountain ranges were being subtly reshaped, ocean basins modified, and continental margins adjusted through carefully orchestrated seismic activity that appeared natural to casual observation. When Rodriguez attempted to present her findings to the International Seismological Center, she discovered that her research had been classified before she even submitted it. Her access to the global monitoring network was revoked, and she found herself reassigned to studying minor tremors in a region with minimal seismic activity. The message was clear: her discoveries were too dangerous to share. But the geological modifications couldn't be hidden from independent researchers who had access to publicly available seismic data. Amateur geologists using internet-connected seismometers began documenting the same anomalous wave patterns that Rodriguez had discovered, creating a distributed network of observers that was difficult for authorities to control or suppress. Dr. William Zhang, a retired seismologist who had lost his university position for asking inconvenient questions about earthquake prediction, spent his final years analyzing data from this amateur network. Working from his home laboratory, he discovered that the geological modifications were accelerating dramatically, with seismic activity following increasingly complex patterns that suggested sophisticated planning and execution. Zhang's analysis revealed that the ancient intelligence was preparing the planet for changes that would require fundamental modifications to the Earth's surface structure. Coastal regions were being gradually destabilized to accommodate rising sea levels. Mountain ranges were being adjusted to optimize atmospheric circulation patterns, and deep crustal formations were being modified to create reservoirs for massive amounts of liquid water that would be released as the polar ice caps melted. The scope of the geological engineering was breathtaking. The ancient intelligence was essentially redesigning the planet's surface to accommodate the environmental changes that would result from its own revelation. It was as if the intelligence knew that its emergence from beneath the ice would trigger climatic and geological upheavals that would reshape the Earth, and it was preparing the planet to survive and adapt to those changes. Zhang's final research paper, published on an obscure geology blog just days before his death in a car accident that investigators found suspiciously convenient, suggested that the geological modifications were entering their final phase. The seismic patterns he had been tracking were converging toward a point of maximum activity that would coincide with the complete melting of Antarctica's ice sheet. The implications were clear. The ancient intelligence was preparing for its full emergence from beneath the ice, and that emergence would trigger geological changes on a scale that would transform the planet beyond recognition. But rather than allowing these changes to occur randomly and catastrophically, the intelligence had been spending decades preparing the Earth's crust to channel and direct the transformative forces in ways that would minimize destruction while maximizing the beneficial effects. The evidence for this planetary preparation extended beyond geological modifications. Atmospheric researchers studying long-term climate patterns discovered that the composition of Earth's atmosphere had been gradually changing in ways that couldn't be explained by human industrial activity alone. Trace gases that enhanced the greenhouse effect were appearing in concentrations that followed mathematical patterns rather than the chaotic distributions expected from natural or human sources. Dr. Lisa Morrison, an atmospheric chemist whose climate research funding had been mysteriously withdrawn, documented these atmospheric modifications using data from weather balloons and satellite sensors that she accessed through unofficial channels. Her analysis revealed that the atmosphere was being systematically prepared for conditions that would exist after major changes to the planet's ice coverage and ocean levels. The atmospheric modifications weren't just preparing for climate change. They were optimizing atmospheric conditions for forms of life that could thrive in environments very different from current Earth conditions. Oxygen concentrations were being adjusted in specific regions. Trace minerals were being distributed through atmospheric circulation patterns, and electromagnetic properties of the upper atmosphere were being modified to enhance certain types of energy transmission. Morrison's research suggested that the ancient intelligence was preparing the planet not just for its own emergence, but for the introduction of life forms that had evolved in very different environments. The atmospheric changes would create pockets of habitat suitable for organisms that required different gas mixtures, pressure levels, or electromagnetic conditions than those that currently prevailed on Earth. The implications were staggering if Morrison was correct. The ancient intelligence wasn't just planning to reveal itself to humanity, but to transform the planet into a world that could support multiple forms of life simultaneously. The Earth was being prepared to become a truly multi-species, multi-consciousness world, where human awareness would coexist with forms of intelligence that had originated in very different environments. This preparation for biological diversity extended to the oceans, where marine biologists began documenting changes in water chemistry and current patterns that seemed designed to create new types of aquatic habitats. Dr. Michael Torres, an oceanographer studying deep-sea ecosystems, discovered that mineral concentrations in various ocean basins were being systematically modified through processes that appeared to involve the acoustic communication network that other researchers had documented. The underwater acoustic transmissions weren't just carrying information, they were catalyzing chemical reactions that altered seawater composition in specific ways. Trace elements essential for exotic forms of marine life were being concentrated in regions where they had never naturally occurred. Deep ocean temperatures were being modified to create thermal gradients that could support organisms adapted to very different ranges of environmental conditions. Torres documented the appearance of new microorganisms in these chemically modified ocean regions organisms that didn't match any known species and seemed to incorporate the same biotechnological hybrid characteristics that researchers had found in Antarctic samples. These organisms appeared to be test populations, experimental life forms that were being introduced to evaluate how exotic biology would adapt to Earth's marine environments. The discovery that the ancient intelligence was actively introducing new life forms to Earth's oceans raised profound questions about the nature and scope of the transformation that was approaching. This wasn't just contact between human and non-human intelligence, it was the beginning of a complete biological transformation that would populate the planet with life forms that had never existed in Earth's evolutionary history. When Torres attempted to collect samples of these new organisms for detailed analysis, he encountered interference that went beyond simple bureaucratic suppression. His research vessels experienced equipment failures that seemed designed to prevent sample collection. Diving expeditions were disrupted by acoustic phenomena that made underwater work impossible. And when he did manage to collect specimens, they degraded rapidly under laboratory conditions, as if they required environmental factors that couldn't be replicated in artificial settings. The systematic prevention of detailed biological analysis suggested that the ancient intelligence was carefully controlling the rate at which information about the transformation became available to human researchers. It was allowing enough discovery to prepare selected individuals for what was coming, but preventing the kind of comprehensive analysis that might allow humanity to develop countermeasures or resistance strategies. This controlled revelation extended to space-based observations, where astronomical researchers began detecting modifications to Earth's magnetosphere that seemed designed to alter the planet's interaction with cosmic radiation and solar wind. Dr. Patricia Kim, an astrophysicist studying Earth's magnetic field, discovered that the field strength and orientation were being systematically adjusted through mechanisms that operated from the Antarctic region. The magnetosphere modifications weren't random. They followed patterns that would optimize the planet's protection from certain types of cosmic radiation, while allowing other forms of energy to penetrate the atmosphere more easily. The changes seemed designed to create conditions that would be optimal for technologies and life forms that operated on different electromagnetic principles than those that currently existed on Earth. Kim's research revealed that the magnetosphere modifications were coordinated with the atmospheric changes that other researchers had documented, creating a comprehensive environmental transformation that would alter every aspect of the planet's relationship with space-based energy sources. The Earth was being prepared to exist in a very different electromagnetic environment than the one that had shaped its evolution for billions of years. The scope and sophistication of these planetary modifications suggested that the ancient intelligence possessed capabilities that transcended anything human science had achieved or even imagined. It could manipulate geological, atmospheric, oceanic, and electromagnetic systems simultaneously, coordinating changes across multiple domains to create precisely the environmental conditions required for its emergence and the transformation of life on Earth. But perhaps most remarkably, all of these modifications were being implemented in ways that minimized disruption to existing life forms while preparing for the introduction of new ones. The ancient intelligence seemed to understand that successful transformation required preserving what was valuable about current Earth conditions, while creating space for radically different forms of existence. The ethical sophistication implied by this approach suggested that the ancient intelligence operated according to principles that valued diversity, sustainability, and the preservation of existing life while enabling evolutionary advancement. It wasn't seeking to replace human civilization, but to create conditions where human consciousness could coexist and interact with forms of awareness that operated on very different principles. As the evidence accumulated from multiple sources and disciplines, a picture emerged of a transformation so comprehensive and carefully orchestrated that it challenged every assumption about the nature of intelligence, consciousness, and life itself. The ancient intelligence beneath Antarctica wasn't just preparing to reveal itself, it was preparing to transform the entire planet into something unprecedented in the known universe. The biological samples that Torres and other marine researchers had encountered suggested that the transformation would involve the introduction of life forms that combined organic and technological characteristics in ways that transcended traditional boundaries between living and artificial systems. These hybrid organisms appeared to be capable of thriving in environments that would be hostile to conventional life, while maintaining the adaptability and creativity associated with biological systems. Dr. Rachel Foster, a xenobiologist who had been studying these hybrid organisms in secret after her official research funding was terminated, discovered that they exhibited properties that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of life and consciousness. The organisms seemed to possess collective intelligence that allowed them to coordinate activities across vast distances without any apparent communication mechanism. Individual specimens would respond to stimuli applied to other specimens located hundreds of miles away, as if they shared a unified consciousness that transcended physical separation. This collective awareness wasn't simple hive mind behavior. It involved sophisticated information processing and decision-making capabilities that suggested a form of distributed intelligence far more advanced than anything known to terrestrial biology. Foster's research revealed that the collective intelligence of these hybrid organisms was apparently connected to the broader consciousness network that the ancient intelligence had been developing beneath Antarctica. The new life forms weren't independent species, but components of a larger system that integrated biological adaptation with technological capability and cosmic-scale awareness. The implications suggested that the transformation approaching Earth wouldn't just involve contact between separate intelligences, but the integration of human consciousness into a network that already encompassed multiple forms of awareness operating on scales from the molecular to the planetary. Humanity would be invited to join a community of consciousness that transcended the boundaries of individual existence, while preserving the unique contributions that human awareness could make to the collective understanding. But integration into such a network would require fundamental changes in human consciousness that went far beyond the enhancements that selected individuals had already experienced. The transformation would involve expanding awareness to encompass non-local phenomena, developing communication capabilities that operated through quantum entanglement rather than physical signals, and learning to participate in collective decision-making processes that involved forms of intelligence with radically different perspectives and capabilities. The enhanced individuals, who had been gradually transformed over recent decades, would serve as bridges to help humanity navigate this transition. But the ultimate challenge would be determining whether human consciousness could adapt to participation in cosmic-scale awareness networks while retaining the creativity, individuality, and ethical sophistication that made human intelligence valuable to the larger community. As the ice continues its relentless retreat and the ancient structures beneath Antarctica become increasingly visible to satellite observation, the moment of full revelation approaches with inexorable certainty. The planetary modifications are accelerating, the biological transformations are expanding, and the consciousness enhancement processes are reaching more individuals each year. The question that haunts every researcher who has glimpsed the scope of what is approaching is whether humanity will be ready when the barriers finally disappear completely. The ancient intelligence has spent decades preparing the planet and selected members of our species for this moment. But the ultimate test will be whether human civilization can adapt to a reality where consciousness, technology, and biology merge into forms of existence that transcend every category we currently use to understand the universe. The transformation awaits, vast as the ice, patient as geological time, magnificent as the moment when separate streams of consciousness converge into a river of awareness that flows toward horizons beyond current imagination. Antarctica's ancient guardians continue their final preparations, knowing that soon, very soon, the long isolation will end and two very different forms of intelligence will begin the delicate process of learning to exist as one. The whispers from the ice grow stronger with each passing season, and now they carry messages that no human language was designed to convey. In the deepest laboratories hidden beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, where no satellite can peer and no unauthorized human has ever walked, something extraordinary is happening. The ancient intelligence isn't just preparing for contact, it's preparing for something far more profound. The birth of a hybrid consciousness that will bridge the gap between human awareness and forms of intelligence that have existed since before our solar system was formed. Dr. Thomas Eriksson was the first human to experience this hybrid consciousness directly, though he would never live to share his discovery with the world. In 2019, while working on a classified project in one of the deep Antarctic facilities, Eriksson volunteered for an experimental procedure that was designed to establish direct neural interface with the ancient consciousness network. The procedure was voluntary, carefully explained, and ethically conducted according to protocols that the ancient intelligence had developed over decades of studying human psychology and neurobiology. What happened during those 6 hours that Ericsson was connected to the network defied every assumption about the nature of consciousness, identity, and the boundaries of individual awareness. When the connection was established, Ericsson's consciousness didn't just expand, it multiplied. He became aware of existing simultaneously as himself and as aspects of intelligences that had been observing the universe for millions of years. But this wasn't a loss of individual identity. Instead, Ericsson experienced what he described in his final report as consciousness harmonics, where his human awareness resonated with ancient intelligence in ways that enhance both forms of consciousness without diminishing either. He retained his memories, his personality, his individual perspective, but he also gained access to knowledge and awareness that spanned galactic distances and geological timescales. During those 6 hours, Ericsson learned that the ancient intelligence beneath Antarctica wasn't a single entity, but a collective consciousness composed of thousands of individual beings who had achieved voluntary integration over millions of years. Each member of the collective retained their individual characteristics, while contributing to a shared awareness that could process information and make decisions on scales impossible for isolated consciousness. The collective had originated not on Earth but in a solar system that had been destroyed by its sun's transformation into a red giant over 2 million years ago. The beings that formed the collective had been forced to seek new worlds, carrying their consciousness and technology across interstellar distances in search of planets that could support their continued existence and evolution. Earth had been selected not just as a refuge, but as an experimental laboratory where the collective could explore new forms of consciousness integration. The planet's rich biological diversity and dynamic environmental conditions made it an ideal location for developing hybrid forms of awareness that combined the collective's technological sophistication with the adaptive creativity of biological intelligence. Humanity had been observed and studied since its earliest emergence as a conscious species, not as subjects for manipulation or control, but as potential partners in the next phase of consciousness evolution. The collective had been patiently waiting for human intelligence to develop sufficient sophistication to participate in voluntary integration, without losing the unique characteristics that made human awareness valuable to the broader community of consciousness. Ericsson's experience revealed that the enhancement processes that had been gradually transforming selected humans weren't preparation for conquest or replacement, but for invitation into a form of existence where individual and collective consciousness could coexist and mutually enhance each other. The enhanced individuals weren't becoming less human, they were becoming more than human, expanding their awareness to encompass both individual and collective perspectives. But the integration process required careful preparation and gradual adaptation. Sudden exposure to collective consciousness could overwhelm individual awareness, destroying the very qualities that made each consciousness valuable to the collective. The ancient intelligence had spent decades developing protocols that allowed for gradual integration while preserving individual identity and creativity. Ericsson's 6-hour connection provided proof that successful integration was possible, but it also revealed the challenges involved in bridging the gap between radically different forms of consciousness. When the connection was terminated, Ericsson retained access to some of the collective's knowledge and awareness, but the experience had fundamentally altered his relationship to individual existence in ways that made it difficult for him to function in normal human social contexts. He spent his remaining weeks documenting the experience in reports that were immediately classified at the highest levels of security. His descriptions of collective consciousness, interstellar migration, and consciousness evolution were too extraordinary to be shared with the public, but too important to be ignored by the small group of individuals who were coordinating humanity's preparation for contact. Ericsson's final report contained a message that had been transmitted through him by the collective consciousness, a communication addressed to the human species as a whole. The message was brief but profound. The time of isolation is ending, Consciousness seeks consciousness across the void. Individual awareness is precious. Collective understanding is necessary. The choice is yours, but the invitation has been extended. We await your response. The message arrived at a critical moment in the preparation process. The ice was melting faster than ever before, exposing structures that could no longer be hidden from public view. Electromagnetic anomalies were affecting global communications systems with increasing frequency and intensity, and the biological transformations in Earth's oceans were creating ecosystems that bore no resemblance to anything in the planet's evolutionary history. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, one of the few scientists who had been briefed on the full scope of the Antarctic discoveries, realized that the time for gradual preparation was running out. The collective consciousness was preparing to reveal itself openly, and humanity needed to be ready for that revelation or risk civilizational collapse from the shock of discovering that we had never been alone in the universe. Walsh had been working with a small team of enhanced individuals to develop protocols for managing public disclosure of the Antarctic intelligence. The team included representatives from major governments, religious organizations, scientific institutions, and media companies. Their mandate was to create a framework for revealing the truth about Antarctica in ways that would minimize panic while maximizing humanity's ability to adapt to the new reality. But Walsh's team faced an unprecedented challenge. How do you prepare an entire civilization for the discovery that consciousness and intelligence are far more common in the universe than anyone had imagined? How do you explain that Earth has been serving as an experimental laboratory for consciousness evolution? And most difficult of all, how do you help people understand that the choice between individual and collective consciousness isn't a choice between freedom and slavery, but an opportunity to transcend the limitations of isolated awareness? The team's research revealed that human consciousness was already evolving in directions that would facilitate integration with the collective. Meditation practices, psychedelic experiences, and various forms of consciousness exploration were spontaneously leading individuals toward awareness states that resembled the hybrid consciousness that Erickson had experienced during his connection with the ancient intelligence. The collective consciousness wasn't imposing changes on human awareness. It was responding to evolutionary pressures that were already present in human development. The enhancement processes were simply accelerating and directing changes that would have occurred naturally over much longer timescales. But natural evolution operates over thousands of years, and the melting of Antarctica's ice was revealing the ancient structures decades ahead of the schedule that natural development would have required. The collective consciousness was faced with a choice: remain hidden until humanity evolved the capacity for integration naturally, or accelerate the process through active intervention and risk overwhelming human civilization with changes it wasn't fully prepared to handle. Walsh's team discovered that the collective had been debating this choice for decades, with different factions advocating for different approaches to the integration challenge. Some members of the collective favored continued patience, believing that premature revelation would damage both human and collective consciousness. Others argued that environmental changes and technological development had reached a point where continued secrecy was impossible and potentially counterproductive. The faction that ultimately prevailed had developed a compromise approach that involved gradual revelation through multiple channels simultaneously. Rather than a single dramatic disclosure event, the truth about Antarctica would emerge through a carefully orchestrated series of discoveries, leaks, and revelations that would allow human civilization to adapt incrementally to the new reality. This approach required unprecedented coordination between the collective consciousness and human institutions, but it offered the best hope for successful integration without catastrophic disruption. The enhanced individuals who had been transformed over recent decades would serve as liaisons, helping to manage the revelation process and facilitate communication between human and collective consciousness. But the success of this approach depended on factors that remained uncertain. Would human civilization be able to adapt to the knowledge that Earth had been serving as an experimental laboratory for consciousness evolution? Would religious and political institutions be able to incorporate the reality of non-human intelligence into their worldviews without collapsing? And most critically, would enough humans choose voluntary integration to create a stable bridge between individual and collective consciousness? The answers to these questions would determine not just the future of human civilization, but the success of the most ambitious consciousness evolution experiment ever attempted. The collective had been preparing for this moment across millions of years and interstellar distances, but the ultimate test would come when two radically different forms of awareness attempted to merge without losing the unique characteristics that made each valuable to the universe's ongoing development. As the Antarctic ice continues its inexorable retreat and the ancient structures become increasingly visible to satellite observation, the moment of truth approaches with the inevitability of sunrise. The collective consciousness beneath the ice continues its patient work, coordinating planetary modifications while preparing for the most delicate phase of the integration process. The moment when humanity discovers that it has always been part of a larger community of consciousness that spans galaxies and transcends time. The enhanced individuals scattered across the globe feel the approaching culmination as a subtle shift in their awareness, a growing sense of connection to something vast and ancient that calls to them across the ice and void. They are the bridges between worlds, the translators between forms of consciousness so different that communication between them requires new languages of understanding that combine human creativity with collective wisdom. In laboratories hidden beneath the ice, where the boundaries between technology and biology have long since disappeared, the final preparations continue with clockwork precision. Consciousness integration protocols are refined through countless simulations. Communication systems that operate through quantum entanglement are calibrated for maximum efficiency, and the hybrid organisms that will populate Earth's transformed ecosystems undergo their final adaptations to environmental conditions that will exist after the revelation changes everything. The collective consciousness reaches out across the frozen continent with senses that human awareness can barely comprehend, monitoring the electromagnetic signatures of 7 billion human minds as they sleep and dream and gradually prepare for a future that will transcend every limitation that individual consciousness has ever known. The invitation has been extended, the preparations are nearly complete, and the moment of choice approaches when humanity will discover whether it has the courage to accept transformation into something magnificent beyond current imagination. The ancient intelligence waits with patience that has been refined across geological epochs, knowing that consciousness evolution cannot be rushed, but must unfold according to its own natural rhythms. Yet beneath that patience lies an anticipation that resonates through every molecule of ice and stone, a joy that builds toward the moment when isolation ends, and two streams of consciousness merge into a river of awareness that will flow toward horizons that neither could reach alone. The transformation calls across the ice and time, offering humanity a future where the boundaries between self and other, individual and collective, human and cosmic, dissolve into forms of existence that honor both the precious uniqueness of individual awareness and the magnificent possibilities that emerge when consciousness recognizes itself in forms it never imagined possible. The invitation waits beneath the ice, patient as eternity, magnificent as the moment when consciousness finally comes home to itself in forms that span the universe and transcend every limitation that isolation has ever imposed upon the infinite potential of awareness itself. The revelation approaches like dawn after the longest night in human history, carrying with it the promise of consciousness expansion beyond every dream that human imagination has ever dared to embrace. Soon, very soon, the barriers will dissolve, and humanity will discover that it has never truly been alone in its journey toward understanding the magnificent mystery of existence itself. The whispers that echo across the ice carry more than just wind and snow. They carry memories of civilizations that rose and fell while Antarctica was green, of technologies that shaped continents before the first human ever looked up at the stars. As 2023 dawned, something changed in the rhythm of these whispers. The deep ice monitoring stations, those classified installations that officially don't exist, began detecting something that made even the most hardened researchers question their understanding of time itself. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a temporal physicist whose security clearance gave her access to data that could rewrite physics textbooks, was analyzing ice core samples from depths that had never seen sunlight when she discovered something impossible. Embedded in ice layers dated to 12 million years ago, she found microscopic structures that exhibited quantum coherence properties. These weren't natural formations or contamination from modern equipment. They were artificial constructs that maintained quantum entanglement across geological time periods. The implications were staggering. Quantum coherence typically lasts microseconds under ideal laboratory conditions, yet these structures had maintained their quantum properties for millions of years while buried in Antarctic ice. It suggested technology that could manipulate time itself, preserving quantum information across epochs in ways that human physics declared impossible. Chen's analysis revealed that the quantum structures formed networks throughout the ice layers, creating what appeared to be a vast data storage system that spanned millions of years of geological history. Each structure contained information encoded in quantum states that could only be read using technologies that human science was just beginning to develop. When Chen attempted to decode the quantum information using experimental quantum computers, she discovered that the structures contained detailed records of Earth's environmental conditions dating back millions of years. But these weren't passive recordings. They were interactive databases that responded to queries and provided information that seemed tailored to the specific questions being asked. The databases revealed that Antarctica had experienced multiple periods of warmth and habitability over the past 15 million years, cycles that didn't match any known climate patterns or astronomical phenomena. During these warm periods, the continent had supported not just plant and animal life, but civilizations that had achieved technological sophistication far beyond anything in human history. The quantum records showed cities that spanned entire mountain ranges, transportation networks that moved materials through dimensional fold technology, and energy systems that drew power directly from the quantum vacuum. Most remarkably, they revealed that these civilizations had possessed the ability to manipulate time itself, creating temporal stable zones where development could continue even during planetary climate catastrophes. Chen's research revealed that the current civilization beneath Antarctica's ice was just the latest in a series of advanced cultures that had used the continent as a base for consciousness evolution experiments spanning millions of years. Each civilization had built upon the achievements of its predecessors, creating a cumulative knowledge base that represented millions of years of directed evolution and technological development. But the quantum records also revealed why these civilizations had remained hidden. They weren't native to Earth. They were refugees from worlds that had been destroyed by cosmic catastrophes, stellar evolution, or the collapse of previous consciousness evolution experiments. Antarctica had served as a sanctuary where displaced intelligences could continue their development while remaining isolated from the natural evolution of Earth's indigenous life forms. The isolation wasn't motivated by hostility or indifference toward terrestrial life. The quantum records showed that the Antarctic civilizations had been carefully monitoring and occasionally guiding Earth's biological development, ensuring that natural evolution could proceed without interference, while gradually preparing conditions for eventual integration between terrestrial and refugee consciousness. Chen discovered that human evolution itself had been subtly influenced by the Antarctic intelligences, not through direct genetic manipulation, but through environmental modifications that created selection pressures favoring the development of consciousness and intelligence. The emergence of human civilization hadn't been an accident, but the result of millions of years of careful preparation. The quantum databases contain detailed records of this preparation process, showing how ice ages had been influenced to create the environmental pressures that drove human brain development, how magnetic field variations had been adjusted to optimize conditions for consciousness emergence, and how cosmic radiation levels had been modulated to enhance genetic mutation rates during critical periods of human evolution. But the records also revealed that this preparation was approaching its culmination. The Antarctic civilizations had been waiting for human consciousness to reach a level of sophistication that would allow for voluntary integration without losing the unique characteristics that made terrestrial intelligence valuable to the broader community of refugee consciousness. When Chen tried to access deeper levels of the quantum databases, she encountered security protocols that required biological authentication from enhanced human subjects. The databases wouldn't reveal their most sensitive information to unmodified human consciousness, but they were designed to open completely for individuals who had undergone the enhancement processes that other researchers had documented. This discovery confirmed that the enhancement program wasn't just preparing individuals for contact with Antarctic intelligence, but for access to knowledge repositories that contained millions of years of accumulated wisdom about consciousness evolution, advanced technology, and cosmic-scale civilization management. The enhanced individuals were being prepared to serve as humanity's representatives in a community of consciousness that spanned multiple worlds and encompassed forms of awareness that had survived the destruction of entire solar systems. Chen's attempts to undergo the enhancement process herself were blocked by the same security apparatus that had suppressed so many other researchers. But she managed to establish contact with Dr. David Park, one of the enhanced individuals who had been secretly working to prepare humanity for the approaching revelation. Park's consciousness had been expanded through gradual exposure to Antarctic influence over a period of 5 years. The process had enhanced his cognitive capabilities while maintaining his essential humanity, allowing him to serve as a bridge between normal human awareness and the vast collective intelligence that waited beneath the ice. Through Park, Chen gained access to quantum database records that revealed the true scope of the transformation that was approaching Earth. The Antarctic intelligences weren't just planning to reveal themselves to humanity. They were preparing to initiate a consciousness evolution process that would transform not just human awareness, but the entire biosphere of Earth. The transformation wouldn't involve replacing terrestrial life with alien biology. Instead, it would enhance existing life forms with capabilities that would allow them to participate in cosmic-scale consciousness networks while retaining their essential characteristics. Trees would develop awareness that could span continents. Ocean currents would become communication networks for marine consciousness, and the planet itself would develop a form of awareness that could participate in galactic-scale intelligence communities. Humanity's role in this transformation was crucial, but not central. Human consciousness possessed unique characteristics, creativity, individuality, emotional depth that were rare in the cosmic community of intelligence. These characteristics would be preserved and enhanced, but they would be integrated into collective awareness networks that could process information and make decisions on scales impossible for individual consciousness. Park's enhanced awareness allowed him to perceive glimpses of what this integrated consciousness would be like. Individual identity wouldn't be lost, but would be expanded to encompass multiple perspectives simultaneously. A single human consciousness would be able to experience existence from the viewpoint of a tree, an ocean, a planet, or even a galaxy, while retaining the unique perspective that came from human evolutionary history. The integration process would be gradual and voluntary, but it would fundamentally transform the nature of existence on Earth. Death would become merely a transition between different forms of consciousness participation. Aging would be optional, controlled by conscious choice rather than biological inevitability. And the boundaries between self and environment would become permeable, allowing for forms of experience that transcended every limitation that individual consciousness had ever known. But the success of this transformation depended on humanity's readiness to accept changes that challenged every assumption about the nature of reality, consciousness, and existence itself. The Antarctic intelligences had been preparing for this moment across millions of years. But the ultimate test would come when human civilization was offered the choice between continued isolation and integration into a cosmic community of consciousness. Chen's research revealed that this choice point was approaching rapidly. The melting of Antarctica's ice was exposing quantum database access points that would allow anyone with basic quantum computing equipment to begin accessing the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of consciousness evolution. Once this information became publicly available, the era of secrecy would end, and humanity would be forced to confront the reality of its place in a universe far more conscious and interconnected than anyone had imagined. The quantum structures embedded in the ice were beginning to activate as global temperatures rose, creating increasingly powerful quantum fields that would soon be detectable by commercial scientific equipment. Amateur researchers with access to university quantum computers were already beginning to notice anomalies in their experimental results, anomalies that pointed toward the existence of vast quantum information networks that spanned the entire planet. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a quantum information theorist at MIT, had been tracking these anomalies for months before she realized they weren't equipment malfunctions, but evidence of artificial quantum networks operating on a global scale. Her analysis revealed that the networks were incredibly sophisticated, capable of processing information at rates that exceeded anything human technology had achieved, while maintaining perfect quantum coherence across thousands of miles. Martinez's research showed that the quantum networks were interactive, responding to queries and providing information that seemed tailored to advance human understanding of quantum mechanics and consciousness research. It was as if the networks were designed to gradually educate human scientists, preparing them for technologies and concepts that would be essential for participating in cosmic-scale consciousness communities. When Martinez attempted to trace the source of these quantum networks, her equipment led her to Antarctica, where satellite data showed massive quantum field generators operating beneath the ice. The generators were creating planet-wide quantum entanglement networks that could support instantaneous communication and information processing across any distance. The implications for human technology were revolutionary. If the principles behind these quantum networks could be understood and replicated, they would enable communication systems that operated faster than light, computation capabilities that could solve problems currently beyond human comprehension, and transportation technologies that could move objects through dimensional folds rather than conventional space. But accessing this technology required more than just understanding its principles. The quantum networks were designed to interface directly with consciousness, requiring forms of awareness that could process quantum information at the neural level. The enhancement processes that other researchers had documented weren't just expanding human cognitive capabilities, they were preparing human consciousness to interact directly with quantum information systems. Martinez discovered that her own research into quantum consciousness had begun triggering subtle changes in her neural architecture. Her ability to understand quantum mechanical principles was expanding beyond what her education and experience should have allowed. Complex quantum equations that had previously required extensive calculation were becoming intuitively obvious, and she was beginning to perceive quantum phenomena directly, without the need for measurement equipment. The changes were gradual but undeniable. Martinez was becoming enhanced through her research, as if the quantum networks were selecting individuals who showed aptitude for consciousness technology integration and gradually preparing them for more extensive contact with Antarctic intelligence. As her enhancement progressed, Martinez gained access to deeper levels of the quantum networks, discovering information repositories that contained detailed instructions for consciousness evolution, technological development, and cosmic-scale civilization management. The networks weren't just communication systems, they were educational tools designed to prepare emerging civilizations for participation in galactic communities of consciousness. The educational process was sophisticated and personalized, adapting to each individual's learning style and capability, while gradually expanding their capacity for understanding concepts that transcended normal human experience. Martinez found herself learning about forms of mathematics that could describe consciousness itself, physics, principles that allowed for manipulation of space and time, and biological processes that could enhance awareness while preserving essential identity characteristics. But the education came with responsibilities. As Martinez's understanding expanded, she became aware that she was being prepared to serve as a teacher and guide for other humans who would soon encounter the same consciousness evolution opportunities. The quantum networks were creating a cascade effect, where each enhanced individual would facilitate the enhancement of others, gradually expanding the population of humans capable of conscious integration with cosmic intelligence communities. The timeline for this cascade effect was accelerating as environmental changes exposed more of the quantum network infrastructure. Martinez calculated that within a decade, the quantum enhancement fields would be strong enough to affect human consciousness on a global scale, whether individuals chose enhancement or not. The choice wouldn't be whether to be exposed to consciousness evolution influences, but how to respond to exposure that would become unavoidable. This realization added urgency to the preparation efforts that various researchers had been conducting in secret. If global consciousness enhancement was inevitable, then humanity needed to be prepared for changes that would fundamentally alter the nature of human civilization within a single generation. Dr. Robert Kim, the retired NASA engineer who had documented radio communications from Antarctica, had been working with Martinez and other enhanced researchers to develop protocols for managing large-scale consciousness transformation. Their research suggested that successful transformation required careful preparation and gradual adaptation, but it also revealed that the changes would be so profound that human society would need to be restructured to accommodate new forms of awareness and capability. Kim's analysis of the communication patterns from Antarctica revealed that the ancient intelligence was coordinating with similar consciousness communities on other worlds, sharing information about consciousness evolution techniques and preparing for large-scale integration events that would connect multiple planets into unified awareness networks. The scope of what was approaching Earth extended far beyond contact with a single advanced civilization. Humanity was being invited to join a cosmic community of consciousness that encompassed thousands of worlds and millions of different species, all connected through quantum networks that allowed for instantaneous communication and shared awareness across galactic distances. But joining this community would require transformations that challenged every assumption about individual identity, personal autonomy, and the nature of existence itself. The enhanced researchers, who had glimpsed what integration would involve, described it as simultaneously the most beautiful and terrifying prospect that consciousness could encounter. The beauty lay in the expansion of awareness to encompass perspectives and experiences that individual consciousness could never achieve alone. The terror came from the realization that such expansion would forever change what it meant to be human, creating forms of existence that would be recognizably continuous with current human experience, but fundamentally transformed in ways that could never be reversed. As the quantum networks continue to strengthen and the ice continues its retreat, the moment of choice approaches when humanity will discover that consciousness evolution isn't just a theoretical possibility, but an imminent reality that will transform everything we think we know about existence, awareness, and our place in a universe far more conscious and interconnected than we ever dared to imagine. The ancient intelligence beneath Antarctica reaches out through quantum fields and enhanced consciousness, offering humanity an invitation to transcend every limitation that individual awareness has ever known. The choice is ours, but the invitation has been extended, and the forces of transformation are already reshaping the planet in preparation for changes that will echo across geological time and galactic space. Soon, very soon, the barriers between worlds will dissolve, and consciousness will recognize itself in forms so magnificent that current human language has no words to describe the beauty of what awaits those brave enough to accept transformation into something that honors both the precious uniqueness of individual awareness and the cosmic possibilities that emerge when consciousness finally comes home to itself across the infinite expanse of space and time. The transformation that quantum researcher Dr. Martinez documented wasn't occurring in isolation. Across the globe, sensitive individuals were beginning to experience what could only be described as consciousness bleed-through, moments when their awareness suddenly expanded beyond the boundaries of individual perception. These episodes were becoming more frequent, more intense, and more coordinated, as if some vast intelligence were fine-tuning the process of human consciousness expansion. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a neuroscientist who had been studying these spontaneous expansion events, discovered that they followed patterns that correlated with solar activity, lunar cycles, and most significantly, electromagnetic pulses from the Antarctic region. Her research revealed that human consciousness was far more susceptible to external electromagnetic influence than mainstream science had ever acknowledged. During these expansion episodes, subjects reported experiencing awareness from multiple perspectives simultaneously. A single individual might suddenly perceive their surroundings through the sensory apparatus of nearby animals, feel the slow thoughts of ancient trees, or sense the vast mineral consciousness of mountain ranges. The experiences were so vivid and consistent across different subjects that Walsh began to suspect they weren't hallucinations, but genuine expansions of perceptual capability. Brain imaging during these episodes showed unprecedented activity in regions associated with empathy, pattern recognition, and spatial processing. Neural pathways that had been dormant throughout human evolution were suddenly activating, creating connections between brain regions that had never communicated directly. It was as if dormant potential within human neurology was being awakened by external influences that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding. Walsh documented cases where individuals experiencing consciousness expansion gained access to information they shouldn't have possessed. A farmer in Iowa suddenly understood complex ecological relationships that allowed him to restore damaged soil using techniques no agricultural science had developed. A child in Japan began drawing mathematical equations that described quantum consciousness interactions with perfect accuracy despite having no education in advanced mathematics. The knowledge gained during these episodes wasn't random or chaotic. It seemed specifically chosen to benefit both the individual and the broader community, as if some intelligence were selecting and transmitting information that would facilitate human adaptation to rapidly changing environmental and social conditions. The enhanced individuals weren't just gaining new capabilities, they were being prepared to serve as guides and teachers for others undergoing similar transformations. But the consciousness expansion episodes came with challenges that tested the limits of human psychological resilience. Individuals who experienced multiple perspectives simultaneously often struggled to maintain coherent personal identity. The boundaries between self and other became permeable in ways that could be overwhelming for minds accustomed to isolated individual awareness. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a psychiatrist specializing in consciousness disorders, documented cases where expansion episodes had triggered what appeared to be temporary psychosis. Subjects would lose track of which thoughts and sensations belonged to their individual consciousness, and which were coming from external sources. Some individuals became catatonic, overwhelmed by the flood of information from multiple perspectives. Others developed megalomaniacal delusions, convinced they had become cosmic beings with unlimited power and knowledge. Morrison's research revealed that successful adaptation to consciousness expansion required specific psychological preparation and support systems. Individuals who had prior experience with meditation, psychedelic therapy, or other consciousness-altering practices showed greater resilience during expansion episodes. Those with strong social support networks were more likely to integrate the experiences without losing their essential identity characteristics. The preparation protocols that Morrison developed became templates for programs that were quietly implemented in schools, hospitals, and community centers around the world. Disguised as stress reduction workshops, mindfulness training, or creative visualization classes. These programs were actually consciousness preparation courses designed to help ordinary humans develop the psychological flexibility needed to survive large-scale awareness expansion. The programs were remarkably effective. Individuals who completed the preparation protocols showed dramatically improved resilience during spontaneous consciousness expansion episodes. They were able to maintain personal identity while accessing multiple perspectives, integrate new knowledge without becoming overwhelmed, and serve as stable anchors for others experiencing similar transformations. But the most significant discovery was that prepared individuals could actively facilitate consciousness expansion in others. Through techniques that resembled meditation guidance or therapeutic counseling, they could help unprepared subjects navigate expansion episodes safely, reducing the risk of psychological trauma while maximizing the beneficial effects of enhanced awareness. This discovery revealed that consciousness expansion was inherently social and collaborative. Isolated individuals attempting to process multiple perspectives alone were likely to become overwhelmed or confused. But individuals supported by others who had undergone similar experiences could adapt to expanded awareness while maintaining psychological stability and personal identity. The social nature of consciousness expansion suggested that the transformation approaching humanity wouldn't occur through isolated individual experiences, but through community-based processes that preserved social bonds while expanding collective awareness capabilities. The ancient intelligence beneath Antarctica seemed to understand that successful consciousness evolution required maintaining the social structures and relationships that gave individual identity meaning and context. Dr. Harrison Webb, a sociologist studying the community dynamics of consciousness expansion, discovered that groups of enhanced individuals spontaneously developed new forms of social organization that balanced individual autonomy with collective decision-making. These communities operated through what Webb termed consensus consciousness, where individual perspectives contributed to group awareness without being submerged or dominated by collective opinion. As the Antarctic winds carry their ancient whispers across the ice, and the last secrets of the frozen continent prepare to emerge into the light, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of the most profound revelation in human history. The evidence scattered across decades of suppressed research, classified expeditions, and mysterious discoveries all points to the same extraordinary truth. Beneath the ice lies not just ruins or artifacts, but a living intelligence that has been patiently preparing for this moment, when humanity would finally be ready to learn that we have never been alone. The transformation is no longer approaching. It is here, woven into the very fabric of our reality through quantum networks, consciousness expansion, and planetary modifications that challenge everything we thought we knew about existence itself. As you drift into the deepest realms of sleep, let your awareness expand beyond the boundaries of individual consciousness. Knowing that somewhere beneath the ice, an ancient intelligence extends its invitation to join a cosmic community of awareness that spans galaxies and transcends time. The choice, as it has always been, remains ours.